Hey, it's David. Welcome back. We got our beautiful painting from last time. I'm going to try and finish today. Um, we're working from a picture, of course, and when doing this from a picture, you want to work in layers. So you start with a good underpainting like we did last time. Last time is what we did, the underpainting. Now we're going to go on top of it, put in some detail, try and flesh out the painting a little bit more. So let's get to it. So when I'm working on a painting like this, of course each one is going to be different. But when looking at a picture, I'm thinking about, okay, what is the very background part? What is that color? The very background color, which is kind of this brown in the dirt. Kind of this dark color here. And then I'm looking at, okay, what's on top of that? I've got some of this like dead pine needles or grass or something that's on top of that. And then on top of that are leaves, which are various colors. And so what I want to do now is I want to go in and get some of this color, this lighter color in there. And then also find some of these spots where I can start to highlight a little bit of the light that comes in like here. And so I'm getting my paint out so I can kind of work on the fly on that. And really, I think the best way to do some of these things that's in nature is just to be as quick and kind of random as possible. For like some of these bits of grass and stuff, like you can't sit there and paint every little blade of grass, but you can go in and do something like this, where I just get a little bit of paint on my brush and I just start going in different spots and kind of just putting in some little streaks here and there. I'm gonna get some more water on the brush for sure, but I'm just putting in little bits here and there of this color, just because I know like most of it isn't going to show up anyways on the finished painting. I just want to get some of that stuff in there for a background. Again, working in layers, try and get as much of a layer going on as possible. I'm just putting down a little bit of that color for now. We're going to go back on top of it. This is, most of this that I'm putting down now you're not going to see. Some of it you will, but most of it no. But painting takes a long time, There's no way that we could do this painting in an hour. Might even take longer than 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours. Painting takes a long time. And a lot of the time when I'm working on paintings too, like I'll work on multiple things at once. I'll be working on a painting and I'll be working on a drawing or a sculpture at the same time, or I'll be working on like 2 or 3 different paintings at once. Just because sometimes, you get frustrated with something and you want to move on and work on something else. It's better to have, more things to do than not enough. Again, who knows where this grass grows? So I'm just kind of putting down random spots of it here and there. Definitely going to go over a lot of this later. Just getting some of that color on there as an underpainting again. Now I want to go in and I'm going to start looking at like, okay, where's the light and shadow? So I want to put some light in over there. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of color. And mix up a little of this brown and white together. And it definitely needs to be darker. And then I'll probably put in a little bit of this just for a little bit of, you know, a little more life to it. It's looking pretty close now. I'm going to put in some light and shadow in there. And of course, like, I'm not worried about just painting over something I just painted. That part was an underpainting. It's meant to be painted over. And I'm just looking at my picture here, looking at this spot here, and like, okay, I'll go over that a little bit more. A little light here. Yeah, and I'll leave it about like there, I think. Looks good. And let's put some more back behind it over here a little bit. And we could put some a little bit up here, I think. And let's see, if I look at my picture, I see like a little bit of lighter stuff over here too. So I'll put in just a little bit over here. But again, like, you can always, you know, make up some of it. You don't have to do exactly what's on the picture, which is what I'm not doing anyways. You know, I'm not painting it perfectly like the picture. Because again, when I'm done with the painting, the picture isn't going to be around. Nobody's going to be looking at the picture comparing it. You know, maybe if they were, like, I'd try and get it like perfect, but most people don't see the original. So I usually don't worry about getting it exactly like it. I worry about making a good painting. And we'll put some of this up here too. Just a little bit around. And a little bit around over here, just to get a little bit in. Alright, it's coming out a little bit better now. I'm not going to worry about this part yet, the light and stuff on there. I'm going to do this later. So what we want to do now is start putting in some of the leaves too. So some of the leaves are like this grayish brown color. They're yellow, they're a little red or orangish, and some pinkish ones. So when you're doing something like this, when you've got all of these little bits of color out, and you kind of want to do it all at the same time like I do now, like, get all of those colors onto your palette first. It's going to make it a lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. So I've mixed up some color. I mixed up like some red, a little bit of orange, some yellow, and then some of this like tannish grayish color. So I've got all those. I mixed all those up. I used some regular yellow and then the yellow oxide and put those together. Some of this color that I already mixed, I just added some black and white to it, you know, and then our naphthol red and some of the, what was it? The raw umber. No, not the raw umber, the burnt sienna. Burnt sienna I added to that. Then this was the burnt sienna red and some yellow. But when you're doing something like this where it's a lot of little random things like that, I like to get all these colors, you know, ready. I got them all ready in here to go. And then I like to just, you know, get my brush wet, get in here, and you just start hitting little spots here and there. These are our leaves going in. And you just like hit all the little spots with the leaves here and there. Where's some leaves, you know, and you don't want to put too many in one spot. You want it to look kind of random. And of course, like the ones in the background should be smaller than the ones up front. You just put in some random ones here and there. Little leaves here and there, and you know, if you vary how big you make them too, you know, make a few small ones and a few real big ones, it's going to look better as well. Just kind of randomly vary them here and there. But it's going to take some time when you're doing something like this. You got to layer it and, you know, get a bunch of leaves in there. Of course, like once you get down here, down closer to us, you can always make a few bigger ones. You know, and then you don't see as many when you get down here too. You can always just make a few big ones and just leave it like that. But you know, every painting is going to be different. You're not going to be painting what I'm painting, but you want to work in layers and get it going from there. So then, now I would just move on to the next color. We'll go on with this one. We're not going to put as many of these in there just because this would stand out quite a bit. And you want to think about that when you're working on a painting like this too, and be like, okay, this color is going to stand out a lot. So I'm not going to use too many of these because it'll really, you know, be kind of distracting almost if there's too many of these leaves in there. So just put a few here and there of this color. Yeah, about that. There we go. But you're going to have to experiment a bit. You're going to have to find what works for you, what you like to do. There isn't really a wrong way to paint. I guess maybe with your tongue, if you put the paint on your tongue and tried licking it, that might be a wrong way to do it. But otherwise, you know, there isn't really a wrong technique or anything. It's just, what are you trying to achieve? What are you looking for? Like me, I don't really focus on things being photorealistic. I don't really care. But maybe you do, and maybe you need to, you know, work really closely on it. Because, I mean, there are other ways of painting from photographs. You could zoom in and use a tiny little brush, you know, and focus only on this little square of your painting until it's completely done. And then you'd move on to the next part and so on and so forth till it's done. there's nothing wrong with that. I've done quite a few drawings myself actually that way. But it's just, do you want to do that every time? Do you want to do it now? What do you want to do with your painting? How do you want it to look? I want this painting to look a little more free and, you know, just kind of have some movement to it, some life to it, some kind of just going in whimsically, putting in some leaves. And, you know, looking on my picture too, this color matches most of, you know, a good amount of the leaves that are in there. So I'm going to put in a lot more of this. Okay, now I'm going to start being a little more random with it and just kind of grabbing colors and kind of just mixing them a little together just to get more variation of color. You see, I just grabbed a little bit of this orange and this grayish brown, just kind of mix it together, and I'll just throw in a few of those like here and there. Maybe we need a little more orange up there, you know. Yeah. Just kind of be a little experimental with it, you know, try not to make things look too uniform, because then it starts to look like a computer did it. You don't ever want your paintings to look like a computer did it, unless that's what you're going for, that you're trying to make a painting that looks like a computer did it. So you see though, I'm just like grabbing random color here and there, mixing it up a little bit, finding a few more spots, throwing them in, just randomly putting stuff in there. Still just building up a background layer. This is still just what I would call like the underpainting, but it's getting to be more complex, getting more color in there. All right, let's grab some of this brown, mix this in there. See what happens with this color. Throw a little of that color in there. Yeah, it needs to be more brown. There we go. A little more here and there. Down in the So I'm getting pretty close to most of my leaves being done. There's one last thing I want to put in though. And get a few more leaves. Just a few more here and there. All right. Now that I've got most of the leaves in there though, I do want to put in some darker spots though too. And then you see like there's these logs and trees. I'm going to put that stuff in later. Put in these green leaves later. So I don't want the green to mix with like this red or something. So I'm going to wait for this to dry and then I'll come over with the green. So the next part will be let this dry. Well, put in darkness, let this dry, put in some green. Then I'll let that dry, then put in the trees and the background. So I want to put in some darkness now though. So I'm going to use this dark brown and some black. And I'm just going to find some spots to just throw in some of that here and there as well. You know, just to get even more variation going on. You know, maybe some spots like this where I know it should be darker, you know, butted up against this stone slab, like I know it should be dark there. So I'll go in with a little bit more darkness here, finding some of these spots like that from last time that I'm not as happy with. And just, you know, adding a little more variation here and there. Get some darkness in there. And I'm just kind of randomly going around here and there. Looks like I need a little more brown though. Where is that here? Well, this is why when we did the underpainting too, that I wasn't too worried about, you know, my brush strokes here and there. So I knew like what it would look like on top. And the more paintings that you do, the more that you understand like this layering, and you can start to plan even better and be like, okay, how much work do I need to do at this stage? How much work do I need to do at that stage? You know, where do I need to spend more time working on it? Where can I cut corners and make shortcuts? A lot of painting is about that, like just finding out these spots where like, okay, I don't have to spend as much time working on this part because later on I'm going to be doing it this way. And it just takes doing a lot of paintings to understand that process. I can tell you about it, but until you really get into it and really just start doing it, you don't really know, you know, how long these things will take, or, you know, where I should spend more time working on something, or where I don't need to spend as much time. All right, now it's really starting to look like the floor of a forest though. Really starting to get there. It's coming along, coming to life. But again, like I didn't want it to be, you know, photorealistic. That's not my goal. But if that is your goal, of course, you're going to have to spend even more time working on it and using a little brush. But I would recommend to always do an underpainting though. It's going to make everything so much easier for you. You know, make an underpainting, let it dry, come back, go on top of it. Makes these things so much easier. So I've covered a good amount of these spots with some more dark brown. Now I'm going to go in with some black in just a sec. A little more in there. Alright, yeah, let's hit it with some black now. I'm not going to wash my brush because I don't really need to. Let's go in with some black here and there. Randomly picking out some spots for the black. Need just a touch more black too. And you really want to try and avoid getting big globs of paint on your surface, but it is kind of unavoidable. You know, you're going to get some little globby bits here and there. Just do your best not to have too many of those, at least in the underpainting stage. You know, because you're going to paint over this, so you don't want too many glob of paint. So it could make it harder to get, you know, the look that you're trying to get. Okay, so now we've got our second layer of underpainting done. Basically, I have to let this dry now to go on top of it and start working on even more spots, even more detail. So next we'll let it dry, and then I'll come in and we'll work on some more of the green. But like I said, I can't take green and put it on top of red until the red dries, or else it's just not going to look right. So I've let all this dry, and now I'm ready to start painting in some of the leaves. I'm going to work in on some of the greenery in there. And because there's quite a variation of the color of green in there, I'm going to start off with mixing up. I mixed up some of my regular green and some yellow, and I got this beautiful bright green, but it's really bright. So I only want to use it here and there, and then I'm going to mix up some white with it and some black and a little more yellow here and there, just to get more variety of color. But I'm going to start with, you know, just a few pieces here and there. And just kind of throwing in a little bit of this green, you know, just here and there. Make sure you get your brush wet. It always paints better with the brush wet. And I'm just picking out a couple little spots. We want some up here. Beautiful bright green though is really nice. A few of those here and there. Now I've got a good amount of that green. I want to, you know, change it up a bit. So I'm going to take a little white and start mixing that up. And then I'll take a little bit of black with that as well. And then we'll start adding this to our bigger thing of green. Alter the color a little bit. I think I want a little more black in there. Yeah, there we go. So I want it dulled out a little bit. You want something dulled out, add a little bit of black and white to it. It'll dull it quite a bit. And we'll add a few of these leaves in there, here and there. And a few over here, and a couple up here, and around here. Just kind of throwing them where I think they should go. Some random spots of green here and there. Makes it more interesting looking though, for sure. And now I'm going to keep going with this, and we're going to add a little bit of white, or a little bit of yellow to it. Alter the color even more. And you see how I do something like this, where like I've got a lot of color that's really similar, but not exactly the same. You know, I'll start with a base color and just keep altering it slightly here and there. And then put that color in, and then change it a little more again. So I got more white. I'll alter it a little more, make it a lot lighter, and stick a little bit of that in here and there. Go with a here. And I'm looking at the picture just to like figure out like where is a good spot to put them, but not exactly like how I put them down. You know, I don't really worry about that too much. There we go. Now I want to make some really dark one. Mix a bunch of black in with it. There we go. A little bit of a grayer color. Looks pretty nice. Get it in here and there. And we'll just leave it. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to start putting in some trees. So to put in the trees now, I want to wait and let this green dry so then I can paint on top of it. So we've got to let that dry. But while I'm letting that dry, I can actually work on something else, and I can work on this. So I'm going to go in and start working on this again. But I got, you know, got to get the paint on my palette. So while I'm letting the green leaves dry, I'm going to work on this a bit and work on getting some of this light and shadow in there. Because this is basically our focus right now, is this bench. And so to start off with, I'm going to make this color again that I did last time. Kind of mix that up a little bit. For our, what's our base color for our light, and then we'll keep adding to that. So I see here, like, here's my lighter spot. I'm going to go in and just kind of put in that light right now. And look for the other lighter spot where I could put this in. There's like some down here. A little bit of lighter spot over here. And then, you know, around here on the top of it. Then we'll mix up a little more. Alter the color a little more. More brown in there, and a little bit more burnt sienna. There we go. Now I want to go in. I'm going to paint the majority of this. The color that we want. And even the lighter spots, like, I didn't need to do that. I just did it because I had that paint ready to go. It was kind of like on my way to getting to this color that I want. So I was like, well, we can throw that in there because it's along the way. But you could always do it this way too, where we kind of paint everything in and then go over it. But because we did our underpainting, you know, this is going to be a lot easier. So yeah, just trying to get this all painted in. Like I said, painting goes pretty slow a lot of the time. I know it would seem like it's pretty fast, but it's actually pretty slow. Pretty slow art process, but we're getting there. There we go. All right. So now I want to find the darker spots, you know, where I want to start adding in some darkness and go in with that and just start, you know, putting that spot in, and then I can blend it in. You see I'm kind of blending it in. Find where I want that darkness and blend it in now while the paint is still wet. You gotta make sure it's still wet though, or else it's not gonna blend at all. I'm just looking here like, okay, here's their darker spot. We want to put this in here. Need a little bit more water. And just find those spots where it needs to be darker and blend it in. And there's going to be spots like here where you don't want to blend it in so much. I want it blended a little bit, but not a lot. And then I'll come in and make it darker even more. Always working in layers, just being like, okay, where is this going? What's the next layer? What do I have to do on this layer? Okay, so you see it's starting to come out like that. And we're going to need a lot of darkness right below it. And this part, like some of these spots where it's like really dark, we'll probably have to come back and do it a second time after it dries. Because right now you see it's just not going to get as dark as we want. We'll never get it super, super dark, which is what we want. So we'll have to come back after it dries and put a little bit more of that darkness in. But for now, like you want to just kind of get it to a good spot where you can kind of leave it, and then we'll come back and add to it later. And you know, because it's a painting, we can always paint over it, so you never have to worry too much. You never have to be like, oh no, it's ruined. Paintings are never ruined. They're abandoned. You can give up on a painting and just be like, I'm done. I'm not adding any more to it. But they're never impossible. You can always come back to it. But I don't think we can add any more darkness to that spot, so we got to come down here and add some more down here. Just finding these spots where we can blend in some of this dark. And again, like this spot is super, super dark, so we're going to have to come back later and add to it. But for now, we kind of just want to get like a good amount of darkness in there, a good base to it, and then we'd come back and add to it later. But you always want to make sure you get more water on the brush. There we go, that's looking pretty close to that. And then we have like a spot like right here. It comes out like this. It's like this board that goes through it. And this one I'll probably have to come back and fix a little bit too later. But just get that, you know, get the base down, come back later, fix it. That is what painting is all about, really. All right. Then we want to add just a few little bits in there. A little bit of darkness in there. A little bit of life in there. Let's see, I'll get a little more in there. And then we want a little bit over here. Then we're going to have to go back in and add that highlights of that light again. Lighten it up a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of white to it now to lighten it up, because we need really bright light there. And a little too watery, but that's okay. I can come back with a little more paint and add to it. Sometimes too, the trick to just solving too much water on your brush is more paint. But that's what I want though, is a little highlight right there. Even though it, it wasn't perfect, I did kind of get exactly what I was going for, so that's good. I'll add a little bit of lightness down here, just to brighten it up even more. And just a touch right here. And that's all that is just looking back at this paint, at your picture, and being like, okay, what else can I do here? Do I need a little more here and there? Just adding just a touch here and there. But yeah, our bench is pretty much done except for this slab underneath it. So we're gonna have to go back and repaint that. But before I do that, I'm out of spots on my palette. I've got to clean my palette out. So I'm going to go do that now. So I mixed up some gray, which is kind of like the base. And I'm kind of just going to put in a base coat of all of this gray over my underpainting here. And then we'll go back and alter it a bit like we did with our bench. And doing underpaintings like this too also make it easier when you go back to repaint. Like you can go right over the edges of things. You don't have to worry about that white bits of canvas showing through. Just make sure to keep Putting water on your brush. And, you know, just kind of be careful when you repaint it a little bit. But have the confidence to do like what I just did there, where you just put in one brush stroke and leave it. Sometimes it's better to just be like, okay, I'm going to do it, and when it's done, and I'm not going to mess with it. We're just going to call it good. Sometimes you will get it right the first time. Not always, but sometimes. It's great because you can be like, okay, I might get it right the first time, but if I don't, I can just let it dry and I'll paint over it. That's why painting is so great. All right. Now I want to add some darkness to it. And if you look on, you know, if I look on my picture, here's where it's really dark. It's kind of dark and it's really dark. So I'm going to go with the really dark spot to first and kind of put it in there. And just kind of blend in to that slab underneath. And if it's not dark enough, I'll just have to come back and add more to it or wait for it to dry and paint over it. That's getting pretty good, I think. Then we want to come down here and get these. This dark, be quite a bit darker. Looks like it goes to about here. And then there was like another stripe of it, like right there. And then you know, over here is pretty dark. In some spots it's actually pretty light. Looks pretty close though. And then we want to add a little bit of lighter stuff to it. So I'm going to take some white to it. And I want this spot over here to be even lighter. And I am going to go over it again after it dries and put in, you know, some of these little bits of like pine needles and leaves and stuff under the bench, you know, but I'd wait for this to dry and then put that in. We'll just get a good base coat on there. And we'll have to let that dry though. And this vent or whatever this is down there, I'm gonna wait for that to completely dry. And then I'd go over it with the tiny, tiny little brush. Let's see. Our green is mostly dry. That means we can start putting in this fence back here and our trees. So that fence is similar to our bench here. The colors are, but it's a little grayer. And that's also why I went into here, because I knew, okay, I'll have all this gray that I can use for this back there. And thinking about that too, it just takes practice to be like, okay, I'm going to be going here next. What can I do with what I have here for the next layer, I guess, the next step. So let's start with that fence. So we're going to have to put in the fence and then let the fence dry and then put in the trees that go in front of it. So you always got to be like, okay, what's in the background? What's the next layer? What's the thing that's closest to me? How do all these things work together? All right. So we got that there. So this fence is complicated. It's really complicated. There's a lot of different things to it. So I'm not going to sit and look at the fence so much and be like, okay, I got to paint that exactly the way it was. I'm not going to do that just because I've already altered reality enough. You know, we put the fence in a different spot. The fence isn't this close to that bench. So I've already changed the way that it was to begin with. So I'm not going to focus so much on my picture and be like, oh, okay, well, here's what it is in the picture, because it's not going to match the picture. So don't even try to match it. It's not even worth your time. But you do want to notice things, though, that are in the picture. It's like, okay, well, it's darker here. You know, there's some shadows here. You know, notice those things and be like, okay, how can I add this to what I'm doing here? But don't be like, oh, okay, you know, it's got to be exactly like what it is in the picture there, because you'll never get it that way, and it's, you know, not worth your time to do it anyways. So right now I'm kind of doing like what we did with the bench here. I'm just like painting in the spots with this base color, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to change it and blend into it with the light and darkness and just altering it a bit. So just hit it with this base, and then we'll alter it, make it more three-dimensional, put our light and shadow in, and it'll be beautiful. Just beautiful. So yeah, we got our base on it. Now I want to look at some spots where I can make it lighter or darker. You know, it definitely can be lighter along the top of it. I think I want the smaller brush though, it'll be easier to blend it in. There we go. I want some of that lighter bit on the top along the fence here. Oh, I need some more water though for sure on my brush. There we go. Now it's blending the way I want it to. Oop. Don't like that too much, but I can come back and paint over it. Sometimes I even do this where I've got like brushes in both hands and, you know, like, okay, I'll put this in. Oh, it's too much. Not right, not right. Come back in with the other brush. Fix it with the other brush. You get the idea. You see how I did that there? I just went back in with this other brush after I've already painted that part in. So yeah, there we go. I got that part in, but it's not perfect, so I'll go back over it with this brush. That looks pretty good. Get the top of this one going. Need some more water. Blend that in there. You're going to find what little tricks work better for you too. This is kind of just like one of my little things I like to do. You know, I just use 2 brushes at once sometimes. You're going to find what works better for you. There we go. All right. Go in with this brush. All right, now let's find some spots where we can put in some darkness. I definitely want a little bit of gray into some of these posts here, but I want it to blend in. There we go. See how sometimes too, like I'll use like a brush like this where like it's got a bunch of gray on it. Oh, it's not right. That doesn't look right. Well, I got this other brush here. It's ready for my blending. Come back in and blend it in. It looks good. And be like, oh, it looks pretty good. Looks pretty good there, but we need some darkness. Even a little more darkness. Come in with a little more, and just kind of throw it in there on that side. Let it blend and leave it. Sometimes that's what you got to do. You just be like, okay, it's coming in. It's right there. A little bit of darkness there. A little bit of shadow. Okay, it's good. Like, okay, here we go. A little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there, and we're good. This is kind of like the way that the post kind of moves into, or the way that the horizontal part moves into the post here. You see there's kind of that darkness. It's really hard to see, you know, on the video, but so little details like this will like add to the realism, but it doesn't, you know, doesn't take away from your painting. And again, I'm not trying to make this photorealistic. I would totally paint this differently if I was going to be like, okay, I want to match it exactly to my photograph. And it's really like what part of it is important to you. Like to me, it's important just to make an interesting, lively painting. And that's just what I'm aiming for. If you want to make it exactly like the photograph, we've got to paint it a little differently. Just a little bit more gray in this one. Ooh. Too much. But see, while the paint is still wet though, you can go back in and kind of blend it back in, fix it a little more. Or, like, you know, wait for it to dry, paint over it. I think that's pretty good though. Like maybe we need a little more darkness like near the bottom of each of them. Just because it's the bottom. I'm going to make it look like it's actually in the ground maybe. But it's looking pretty good. And let's see, what's the last things we could do to finish this off? Maybe add just a little bit of darkness on the bottom. But kind of blend it in and make it a little random too. This wood has like a little bit of a texture too, so you don't have to worry about, you know, oh, it's not perfect. Well, you can be like, well, that's just the texture in the wood. It's fine. Don't worry about it. That looks pretty good though. So I'm going to leave that. We need to let all of this dry now so I can go back and put some trees in and finish off the painting. Alright, so we're going to put in some of the trees now. And other than this tree here, which is mostly black, like most of the trees are kind of like this grayish color. So I made up like this greenish gray color here that we're going to put in for our trees. And I'm not going to put in all the trees that are here. I don't think I'm even going to put in this downed tree. I just don't want it. And that's the great thing of working, you know, from a picture like this is I don't have to put in everything, you know. Be like, well, I'll just put in the parts that I want in my painting. And we definitely need more water on our brush though. And so I'm going to just put in a few trees and then we'll put in, you know, some light and shadow on them. And that'll be about it. I'm not going to really detail these trees as much as I could. But we'll just leave it at that. You could put in lots of trees. And really all I would do to do that is just 2 more layers. Just, you know, put down a base coat like this. Add a little light and shadow to it. Let it dry. Come back in. Put, you know, some more detail on top of it. And just keep going from that. And just keep detailing it and back and forth. And, you know, eventually it'll be done. And let's see, let's put a big tree like right here. Want one big tree right there. Yeah, I want it right there. And this is one of those things too where like you can be like, oh, I didn't really like that spot, so that's why I'm going to paint over it. I'm going to put like a tree on top of that. I do that all the time in painting. You just be like, where's my least favorite part of this painting right now? It's over here. So that's where I'm going to paint over it. There we go. And let's see. Maybe I want to leave that open over here. And maybe, oh, we need like some thin trees though. That is one thing I'm noticing here. There are some thinner trees. So let's go with some thin trees. And I'm just turning my brush sideways for that. Using the same brush though. Put in one tree there. And we'll put in a little sister for the tree right there. Happy little trees. Gotta say that. And let's see. I think that might be good. Maybe put one like right here. Just for a little bit of variation. All these trees were kind of like on the same level. And I think I want one like in the background, like way over here. A real thin one, like way over here. All right. Those look pretty good. Now I want to add a little bit of darkness to them. A little bit of shadow. So I'm going to take a little bit of black. And we're going to come in with a little bit of black and a smaller brush. Got a little bit of water on that brush. And I'm just going to come in and add a little bit of black to one side. And just kind of blend it in. This is still just another layer. I'm going to come back on top of this with a little bit of lightness too. And then you can always come back and detail it even more with like some bark. Make some spots that are a little random. But even as the trees are right now, we could leave the trees the way they are and it'd still look pretty good, I think. The other great thing about painting is you get to decide what happens and when it ends, when you want to keep adding to it, you know, or just be like, okay, that part's done, it's done. It's not changing. Your world. All right. Now I want to go in with a little bit of dark, you know, right at the base. Usually the base of a tree is kind of dark. And also make it so it doesn't stand out as much. And I think a little bit of brown in there too would be good. So I'm going to squirt out a little bit of brown. And we'll add that in here and there. I'm going to go back with some black first though. The main thing, like with a tree like this where it goes into the ground, you just don't want like a flat spot. You know, have it be a little random like that. You see how I'm kind of just like dabbing here and there with some color. Not really focused so much on like, oh, it goes in this spot or whatever, you know, but just making it so it doesn't, we don't have a tree that just kind of just stops right at the ground. Because they never really do that. There's always stuff on top of them or something like that. There. Those look pretty good, and now we want to go in with a little bit of light. Put in a little bit of white on it here and there. I think like I want some right on the edge of this tree. And kind of blend it in. There we go. And a little bit on this tree. You can pick spots like you could do something like that where you just kind of have a little bit more light that kind of goes along. You know, right there. I'm just going to leave those brush strokes just because I like the way it looks. You know, I think it's pretty good there. I'm going to put it a little bit more there. You know, it gives a little more variation. You can see here, like, especially like in these trees, you know, you get a bunch of that variation going on. It just makes it look more lifelike. You know, some of the spots I'll blend in, some I'll just leave, you know, something like that. And just go in a little bit here and there with that. There we go. And the bigger trees, like I usually focus more on blending it because you know, I see a little more of it. Get a little more detail. You can get a little more going on in those. Especially with like real little things. A lot of the time it's better just to like just do it once and leave it and let it go. Let it go sometimes. I'll put a little lightness on that side just to throw it off. Actually, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. So I'm going to change that. Go in with some dark. There we go. can always do something like that where you'd be like, I don't like it. I'm going to come back and change it, fix it, add more to it. The good and bad part about painting, though, is you can always add to it. So I've had paintings where, like, I've let it sit for like 2 or 3 years, and then I'll come back to it and I'll be like, oh, if I could just put in this part, that would make it better. And so I put it in, and of course, like, it makes the painting better. But, you know, you could get into a spot where it's like, oh, geez, this painting is never ending. It just keeps going and going and going. And I'm sure you feel like that's the way this video is. It just keeps going and going and going. When are we going to be at the end? Well, we're real close to the end, though. I'm just coming in with some darkness and kind of just adding to spots that we were working on before, just to make them a little darker. So I want that shadow a little darker here and there. Just adding to stuff we've already done. And this is the way you do it, though, with painting. You just keep going back and adding to it, letting spots dry, coming back, painting over them again, adding a little more to it. That is how you paint. Very rarely do I do a painting and, like, the first brush stroke or first try is perfect. You can see here it's got some little bits of cracks and stuff in there, and I'm just throwing those in here and there just to make it more interesting. Throw in a few cracks. It looks pretty good. And there's like a little dot or something there, and then there's like another one about there. And these must be where they attached the parts to it. And we got a little darkness right here. And we add to just a little bit, like right there. Looks good. We'll add a little crack right there. And then we want some darkness down here. Just a little bit. Okay. And yep, and we want to go back in with this spot here. We need some more darkness in here. Now, right now, like, we're real close to the end of the painting. On this time, like when I'm real close to the end, that's where I just go in and be like, okay, where do we want to add some details? What else can we add to this to make this painting better? What else does it need? Where are some mistakes I want to paint over? And what spots like this, just all they need is just a little more color, a little more paint. Or, you know, something like this where I'm like, oh, I want a little crack like right there. A little bit of wood texture right here. You know, let's go for a little more like right there. And let's see, we want a little more like right here. That's all that's left for this painting, though. It's just going in and finding like, okay, where could I add more to it? Where does it need some more? It needs some more like right here. Like so. And I think that bench is pretty much done. We want to do it, add a little more stuff down there. We do want to put in this little grate. So let's just try and put that in a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect though. Just kind of get it in there. And let's see, a little more darkness around here though. be. And we want this even a little darker, like right there. And you see this is all you can do for the rest of the painting. No, you just find these spots, be like, okay, I want this a little darker here, I want it a little lighter there, and just keep going over it, repainting spots. I think of this spot of the painting kind of like whittling or sculpture, where it's like, okay, now I've got, you know, a good shape. Now I'm just kind of like carving away the last little bits to make it look like what I want it to look like, to make it look like this picture that I've been, you know, working on. That's all you're doing at the end, is just kind of fine-tuning, whittling, or I don't know, just kind of carving it out to be what it's meant to be. And let's see, I think I want just a tiny little bit of lightness going right along the edge here, just to kind of get that distinction a little bit more, that that's the edge. I think that's good. Okay, I think this painting is almost done. The last thing we need to do is just put in our little unicorn over here. So we use a little bit of white, a tiny little brush. Of course, there's lots more I could do in this painting. Like, I could really focus on, you know, the ground here and making that look a lot more realistic. You know, just keep redoing it and adding to it and just keep layering and layering things. You know, definitely there aren't nearly enough leaves in there. I could add more leaves, but I don't want this video to be 3 hours long. It's already probably close to 2. It's probably too long to begin with. So I didn't want to be doing this forever, is basically the answer. But yes, it could use a lot more. This painting could be better. There could be a lot more we do to it, but I just don't want this video to be super, super long. So here I'm just kind of painting in the shape of it, knowing that, you know, I'll come back later and add to it if I need to, but I'm really going to try and just let this painting just kind of be, or let the unicorn just kind of be what it is once I get it done. So I've put in a bunch of white, and really all I want to do now is just add a little bit of shadow to it under its belly and, you know, in a few spots here and there. Use a little bit of darkness to come in and just make the shape a little more what I want. That's not exactly what I want. There we go. A little more darkness under his little belly, little unicorn belly. And a little bit more over there and about there. You see, like I put down this shadow and then I go back over it with the light. It's kind of going back and forth on these things. That's what painting is. It's looking pretty good though. Pretty close to what I want out of this. And the last thing is we got to put in a little unicorn's eye right there. And his little horn. I think I want the horn to really stand out though. So I'm going to use a color that I don't really see in the rest of this painting. I'm going to use like a really bright light white. And this is just altering the painting. You know, I could go for a you know, a subtler color, but that's not what I want. I want a bright yellow that kind of stands out. Maybe dulled a little bit. And get some more brown in there. Make it a little browner. Doesn't need to be too bright. And this one is a little unicorn horn right there. Perfect. It's beautiful. I'd say this painting is done. Of course, like I said, there's so much more you could add to it. But when you're doing a painting like this, it's really like, what is the most important thing? To me, the bench was the most important thing. So I really wanted to make sure that was perfect. But the rest of the ground, like, I didn't care so much about it. But of course, like, you know, you can see here, there's a lot I could come back and do. You know, there's a lot of stuff I could put in the lighter spots. There's more leaves we could definitely put in, you know, and that would just be like layer upon layer upon layer. Just keep layering it. You're going to get there eventually. But like I said, I didn't want this video to be, you know, going on forever. So we're going to end it here. This is our last lesson, though. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. I hope you keep painting. Have a great day. Bye.